That is okay. So, yeah. So the third learning objective is to understand the physical and psychological changes of aging. So there's some indicative reading for this, which I will share with you. So it's understanding the physical and psychological changes of aging. So we'll get to know what aging is and what are the changes that we should expect when one is aging. So there are several changes that we can talk about, like physical changes, respiratory changes, musculoskeletal, skin, etc. So we'll talk. I'll touch upon a bit regarding all of these systems. I won't be able to go into too much of depth, uh, as much which is required from you. Psychological changes. So we'll talk about what happens when uh, aging happens, when a person ages. What are the psychological impacts that you could expect in one to happen? So these include, but they're not just these. The list is more, but it's a longer list. But some of these are the effects on self-esteem. We'll talk about this. We'll talk about what ageism is, what's the impact of it, the theories of aging, the social disengagement, activity theory, some important theories that we'll touch upon, application to current health and social care provision. So what are the services available, such as for aging, for people experiencing aging, what services are there available to support them? So these include self-help, medical and health facilities, social care services, home support, counseling, mediation. So a bit about all of these and what networks exist. Effects on self-esteem and self-confidence, and the influence of theories of aging on health and social care provision. So what are the psychological changes of aging? So it is known that people who are of an increase, like they're of an older age, they have more psychological changes that happen. So you can call them, like they could be more depressed than they were earlier. They might not have had depression ever before, but as they age, because there's a decline in all of their systems, they could have, as a result, they might be depressed, they might be anxious, they might undergo dementia changes because of dementia, in which you tend to forget things, and schizophrenia that may be worsened with aging. And there are studies that suggest that the men are more than 85 times higher at risk for committing suicide. Um, like men over the age of 85, sorry, are at a higher risk of committing suicide than at any age. So if a man reaches that age, which is not very common, but it is becoming increasingly common now, but they then have a higher rate of suicide compared to any other age. So there is something that's related to age which makes it so pronounced at this age. So the physical impacts of aging. So there's some common terminologies that I'll explain to you. So common health conditions associated with aging include hearing loss. You could develop cataracts in your eyes. You could have refractive errors, back and neck pain, osteoarthritis, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, diabetes, and depression and dementia. So you might not have these conditions at all when you were young, or you might have these conditions when you were young, but these conditions are worsened as you grow older. So let's say you might not have COPD, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, when you were young, but as you progress, your age progresses, you might be a smoker, you might be exposed to secondhand smoking, let's say. So your condition tends to worse, your breathing tends to be more impacted. You might not have depression earlier, or you may have slight chances of having depression, but these tend to get worsened when you're at a certain age. Development does not stop at puberty. So adults go through developmental stages that I will discuss with you, which lead to physical, psychological, and emotional changes. So the changes happen throughout your lifetime. There's some major changes that we discussed that happen during puberty when we turn into an adult. But then these changes keep tending to happen. So there's certain changes that happen at every stage of life. We have discussed most of them. So first we look at this physical and psychological changes that are linked particularly to aging. What happens at the physical, when the physical changes take place during adulthood? Because the physical developments that take place earlier, there less attention that's placed on physical development in adult years. So there are three main stages of physical development that we could say that happen during adulthood. Can anyone name those three main stages? Do you have any idea? Anyone? If you don't have any idea, then it's okay. You can just say no. So I'll take that silence as a no. So the first stage is, early adulthood. The second is middle adulthood, and the third is obviously late adulthood. So what happens during these three stages we talk about? So when you're around 65 years of age, you enter the world of late adulthood. Sorry? So that's when you gain access to, you have access to senior discounts, but there are physical changes that take place, which are not very, which you would not want to happen. So there's some negative changes of aging that will begin to take place in your bodies, and it depends upon different people. So everyone has to go through the process of aging, that is for sure. But in some people, the impact is worse compared to in others. So we'll talk about what those factors are. You will actually tell me what those factors are. We'll have a joint discussion on this. The final stage of physical change is when when you've reached your age of late adulthood, that is 65 years. You'll have wrinkles, which become more noticeable. You may start to develop brown age spots on your skin. You react slowly to things, so the reaction time is longer. Even if you needed anything that you required, your eyesight might be deteriorating, and this is most likely that you will need your glasses now if you've never had the requirement before. And if you did require them, your eyesight is going to tend to get worsened as you age. So there are certain physical concerns, two main physical concerns that are associated with physical development. They may become evident in late adulthood. Can anyone name those two main physical concerns? Any idea? No?
No.
Okay, that's okay. So the first is the loss of bone mass, and the second is loss of cognition. So when you lose bone mass, what happens? Can anyone tell me what happens? You lose the mass of your bone.
I think movement will be restricted.
It will be restricted. Very good. What else?
You'll not be able to coordinate yourself as you used to be, or taking
Yeah.
or yeah, taking care of yourself, or maybe getting to the shower, or driving, or doing so
Yeah. So
many
you might.
other physical things.
Mm-hmm. So you might be prone to fractures more often as a result of falls, because as you said, you can't move your body that well. So your mass, your bone is, if it's becoming, if it's losing its its inner matter, if the bone is losing its inner matter, its inner material, if it's becoming more prone to fragmentation, what happens? It becomes fragile. So if you have a simple fall, the impact will be worse when you're older. Whereas if you fall during an earlier age, you might not have such a major injury. You might not break a bone, but because with time your bone mass decreases, um, this happens, which is natural. As much calcium as you take, though, yes, definitely, if you have proper vitamin D, your levels are fine, your calcium is fine, it will have definitely an impact on your long-term health and the strength of your body. But generally speaking, this strength tends to decline with age. The second is loss of cognitive function. So you can't think properly, you start losing stuff, mm, you start forgetting stuff, you start tend to spend more time reacting, because your cognitive level, it falls down. So cognition is obviously thinking to do with your mind. So the physical part is there, but your cognition is also there. So these tend to decline with time. So some tasks that were so easy for you when you were a younger person, you see a 5-year-old running and doing stuff for themselves, uh, and you just find it very hard to be so active. And obviously your demand is that your children, your people who are close to you, they have their demands, but you cannot help it because of your increasing age. Some other physical concerns may include arthritis, again, inflammation of the bones, heart diseases that may become more pronounced as you turn older, diabetes. It's also a disease that's associated with aging. So we have type 1 diabetes, type 2 diabetes. Type 1 is mostly associated with younger age groups. Type 2 is the most common, is type 2, where you develop diabetes at an older age. Malnutrition, inability to absorb vitamins and nutrients due to several conditions. We won't go into details of this, but you may be malnourished also, because your ability to digest also gets tends to get lower. So if you're not eating healthy before, you should start now thinking about your aging. So when you have your patients, when you're talking about your project or your assignments, just keep these things in mind, because you have to have a mindset towards what you would do in your assignment when you start it. So age related changes cannot entirely be stopped. Symptoms can often be managed by proper diet, exercise, medical care. So it is like research has found that the whole process of aging gets delayed when you have a proper diet, your exercise is there, and you have proper medical care. Psychological and emotional development, a bit about this. So when you're an early adult, the things that happen and they're becoming more noticeable than the physical ones, which are the psychological and emotional ones. So physical changes might not appear so drastically, but there will be drastic psychological and emotional changes. This is a very important stage, this adult emotional and psychological development, because we strive to find our place in the world. We, as adults, obviously, there's families that move on. We don't have the same bonds that we had earlier. So this has a psychological and emotional toll in our lives. Um, can you mute yourself? This session is recorded, so it's easier for if you mute it yourself, so that when later on, if anyone wants to access the lecture, Please, Chris and whoever's present in the class, please can you mute yourself? You can unmute yourself whenever there's a question. You can answer that by unmuting yourself. Thank you. So during this time, there are very important decisions that are made in life regarding your career, regarding your life arrangements. And then you are independent. Your choices are independent. There are emotional consequences that are there that would have an impact on you. So adulthood, obviously, we are talking about early adulthood. We're not talking about 65 and above. Obviously, at that time, your career tends to end. You have your that's the pensionable age that you achieve. So before that, when you have the early adulthood, there's some aspects that are very important in it. So one of the major aspect is that it's relationships that you have that you form during your early adulthood. So there's intimate relationships which you depend upon. These can be challenging because you have your own independence and you're finding a relationship where you depend upon someone and that person depends upon you to some extent, and you're learning to share those roles amongst yourselves. There's marriage and family formation, which takes place mostly during early adulthood. And there's emotional and psychological well-being, which is tied to how successful you are at forming those relationships. So you could have a very happy life earlier. You can have an even more happier life when you're married. You have a very good life partner. You have who's emotionally and psychologically found, he or she is sound in those terms. But if it's the reverse, your life, even if you are if you've never had a mental health problem before, a life this your life can change because of these decisions. So that is why these are such important decisions in life. So some people find having kids a very disturbing event in their life. They don't find themselves being responsible for rearing a human for the rest of their lives, for a lot of their lives. Obviously, it's until they reach a certain age when they're independent, but they can't commit themselves to to those roles, and hence they delay it or they just don't want it. So that is understandable. Now when we see people not needing children, not wanting children, it's understandable because they don't feel that they're not emotionally so strong that they can rear another human being, and support that human being, and support themselves, and support probably extended family living with them, their adults living with them. So it's hard, it's not easy for everyone, and especially now with such challenges as a growing economy, and there are several other difficulties that you are facing. So it's a hard decision and needs to be made very cautiously. So let's imagine the difference in the emotional and psychological state of some scenarios that I'll share. So there's Bob. He's 27 years old and he's focused on development of his career. Highly successful at his job, has few close friends, but has little time for romantic relationships. What do you think his life would be like? Any emotional or psychological impact that could have on his life? Anyone, you can unmute yourself.
Yes, there will be emotional and psychological effect. Emotional in a way because it's got no love life. Psychological is living or it's living lonely. Romantic, yes, there's nobody around him, no kids, no friends, or he got some few close friends. Those ones might as well have kids, have a family, so they'll not be having time for him as much. So most of the time, he's psychologically affected because he's not got anybody to really relate to. the way it should have been.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else? So yes, as you said, truly, like, he's very ambitious. He's got his whole life ahead, but he has little time for having a relationship, because of which he has little. He has he's missing out on those special moments, because this is a part of human body. This is a part of human nature, that they need a relationship. This is how we've been created, so we can't deny this fact. No matter how progressively we think, but there is a time for progression, in terms of your job, in terms of your workplace, and there is a time for developing relationships where you want to have the most of your time around people who you love. So if he's successful at his job, he might not have time for his other family members also. So if he's got just close friends that he meets, his parents, his siblings, he doesn't have time for them. So that also would have an impact. Another Shirley, as 33 years old, has 2 children. She's married her college sweetheart. Unfortunately, they were unable to make the marriage work. She still has a friendly relationship with her ex-husband, who is supportive of her children. What do you think she might be going through?
Though the husband is still supportive of her, but there's nothing like the husband being at home, two of them taking care of the kids. So she's going through some emotions, being taking care of the kids alone. Yeah?
Yeah.
She's going through some emotional, psychological, being taking care of the kids alone and being home alone, making all the decisions, most of the decisions for the kids on what to do and what not to do. Maybe other requirement, necessity of life. And she would not be having the most time because of the kids for social life and other things, depending on the age of the kids.
Yeah.
To do her things.
Yeah, that's true. So, so you see, let's see this in terms of, let's say, what could have led to this marriage to break. Obviously, there might have been some differences. They've married, they loved each other before, but the marriage, not every marriage works. So you might choose your career, you might be very career oriented, your partner doesn't like that, or your partner is very career oriented and you don't like that. I'm just giving some examples, and that creates a negative emotion in you, that creates, obviously, that those it has an emotional and psychological impact on you. So the best thing she's done, or they've done, is that they've ended the marriage, because maybe staying in that marriage would have led to more negative impacts. So you can't say that if she is married, she is only happy then. She still has a friendly relationship with her ex-husband, which is very positive, who is supportive of the children, which is again very positive. So you can't say that if she's unmarried, oh, she's living a horrible life. She's living, obviously, yes, she has her hardships. She would have had a very horrible life. The children would have had a very horrible life if that was an unsuccessful marriage that you were still in. So breaking of a marriage is very heartbreaking. It has its own impact, but it's not the end of the world. You see, so you have to, we human beings, we have to live on. So it could happen that she could find another life partner, he could find another life partner, and then they could move on with their lives once their children, and their children could also be protected in that way. And if that doesn't happen, there's single moms, there's single fathers that live and they're happy. So you can't say that you can't label this person as having a very terrible life just because their marriage has ended. Yes, that phase must have been very traumatizing, but if that phase remained, that phase did not happen, that marriage, that relationship that might have turned very ugly, to the extent that they were so close to each other that they had to leave each other, not live together. But then again, there's support there. So that is a positive thing. Now, talking about Joe, he's 30 years old, married to his high school sweetheart. They have an 11-year-old son. He began working just after high school to support his family. Joe now spends his evenings attending community college. Over to you. Any comments about how Joe's living? So Joe, this scenario is a bit vague, I will have to admit. So there's not much information given over here. So there could be a possibility that Joe's living a splendid life. He's spending the mornings with his family, with his wife, and he's spending the evenings at attending college, a community college. But then again, there's a part where he begins working to support his family. So that this means he's married very early in life, and he's a struggler here, and he's spending time studying also to make up for his career, which again shows that he might have married early. But again, early marriage or late marriage is not it's not a statement of being happy or being depressed or being in an emotional upsetting state. uh, so it could be both ways. I would say that it could be both ways. He could have a very splendid life with his family, or he could have a very hard life because he's supporting his family and also attending community college. So when we enter late adulthood, which is 65 years and above, there's a lot of emotional and psychological strain. So late adulthood would have a mixture of some gains and some losses. There's freedom where you retire, there are grown children, fewer responsibilities because the children are married or they're working their own. You don't have to feed them. At times you do, but most of the times you don't. Uh, but then there's concerns about your physical health, and you're reaching close to your mortality. And there's a potential for social isolation also, which happens when you're at an older age. So when you reach this late adulthood stage, a person has a greater risk of becoming depressed and lonely because the family structure, it changes. There are people who become more busy. They don't have time for their older loved ones. They're too busy. They have their own families. So it becomes hard. People visit late. They separate from you because obviously everyone has their own life to deal with. But likely this is due to a sense of loss of activities and people who gave their meaning, their life a lot of meaning. So you might not be able to go to the park that often because you might fear falling. You might be having dementia where you don't remember how to come back to your house. You don't have the jobs because you were working. You were very active and you had your job. So now you don't have your job. What do? You lose those activities. You don't have a to-do list for yourself. So yeah, that's the problem. But then there's some family bonds that you maintain. There are relationships that you maintain. You are active in the community. So this leads to your emotional and psychological well-being even when you reach your late adulthood. So there's certain lifestyle choices associated with aging. So there's wrinkles and gray hair, but there's some other psychological lifestyle. There's some other factors also that have an impact on your health, um, your lifestyle choices, let's say. So let's say about your cardiovascular system. So the most common changes in the cardiovascular system would happen that there's stiffening of the blood vessels. So your blood vessels are not as elastic as they were before. And your arteries, your blood vessels and your arteries, your veins and your arteries are not as elastic as they were before. So your blood pressure raises. This leads to your heart to work harder in order to pump blood through them. So because your blood vessels are stiffened, they can't relax as much as they used to. So your heart works harder to raise uh, that level of filling of the blood vessels. And the heart muscle, it also tends to change. It has to adjust to that increasing workload. So where your heart wouldn't work so hard, so much, so hard, your heart has to now work against that stiffening or stiffened blood vessels. And your heart rate at rest will stay about the same, but it won't increase during activities as much as it used to. So your heart, when you were younger, it it increases your when you're working, for instance, when you're exercising or you're walking, when you were younger, your heart starts pumping more blood. It starts working more vigorously. But when you reach an older age, your late adulthood, because every muscle in your body tends to deteriorate. Your heart is a muscle that also tends to deteriorate. So you see the impact. These would lead to an increase in blood pressure, which is known as hypertension, and other cardiovascular problems such as stroke or clogging of the arteries. Any idea what would happen with your bones? Yeah, what happens with the bones? So we read about the bones that they're becoming more fragile. Their mass is decreasing, their inner mass, which they had. They're becoming more, let's say, less dense from inside. They're becoming more porous from inside. So this is what happens. So when you have your bones, your joints, and your muscles tend to deplete their energy, deplete their reservoir, deplete their matrix, deplete the calcium that they have. So bones tend to shrink in size and density, weakening them and making them more susceptible to fracture. So, for instance, if you fall down, you're more likely to break a bone compared to when you were at a younger age. You might become a bit shorter because there's shrinking of the muscles and the bones. Your muscles lose their strength, the endurance and flexibility. And there's some these things can then impact your coordination. You can't coordinate your muscles properly. You fall because of that. Your stability loses its. You lose your stability. You lose your balance. Some impacts on your digestive system. So you might be more constipated. So what leads to constipation? Why does constipation happen? One, because you're not drinking enough fluids, you have a low fiber diet, you're not having a high fiber diet, you have a low fiber diet. Some medications like iron supplements, which you need when you grow older, diuretics to work for your kidneys, certain other medications. With patients who are diabetic, they may take them and become constipated. But one very important reason for constipation is the lack of physical activity. So if you're just sitting in one place and you are not mobile, you might be more constipated in when you're comparing it with being more active in life. So your bladder changes, there are changes in your memory, there are changes in your brain. Let's go through all of these. So your bladder and urinary tract, they're elastic muscles. So the more there is the more urine that is produced, the more expansion happens to a limit where your muscle called the detrusor muscle, they're expanded, but then you have certain sphincters in your bladder and in other parts of your body as well, which tend to become weaker with age. So your sphincter, what it does, it contracts and it doesn't let the urine spill out, or your feces, let's say, your stool to spill out. This doesn't happen very well when you're at an adult age, because again, it's a muscle. It tightens when you're young, when you need to pee, when you need the big job. It happens when you need it. So you might not have to rush to the toilet, but when you're at an older age, your bladders turn weak, your muscles turn weak. So even a less amount of liquid that you intake, your bladder, because it's so weak, your sphincters are so weak, so they tend to become less spastic, and that would then lead to a spill of urine or feces, because of which may need some medication. This is known as urinary incontinence. So there's weakening of the bladder muscles, pelvic floor muscles, which make it difficult for you to empty your bladder completely and cause you to lose bladder control. So there's an inflamed or enlarged prostate, the prostate gland, which is found in males, which can also cause difficulty emptying the bladder and lead to incontinence. So in prostate, it's an organ. If it grows in size, it's going to obstruct uh, the passage of urine, and then it makes it hard for the bladder to empty completely, and that leads to incontinence. There's some other factors such as being overweight, which we've seen in adult age happening more, nerve damage from diabetes, so you don't realize your the nerves that are linked to your sphincters, they don't signal properly in diabetics. So that is why a diabetic would not know when there is an urge to use the toilet, and hence they might wet themselves. Then certain medications, caffeine, a lot of caffeine and or alcohol consumption can also lead to incontinence. Your memory and thinking skills also deteriorate. So your brain undergoes certain changes when you are at an adult age. So a healthy older adult might forget names, familiar names or words. They may find it difficult to undergo multitasking because they forget. Their memory is not as sharp as it used to be. So you can't help it. This is why you need to exercise your brain in terms of learning. So if you have that attitude, obviously your brain will deteriorate with time, but then you can delay that deterioration with exercising your brain. So you have a good mindset, let's say, throughout your lifetime, even during early adulthood. So if you're in a habit of learning new stuff, that becomes this shrinking of your memory tends to get delayed. And there are other factors also, obviously nutrition, obviously other impacts in life also. Your eyes, ears, and your teeth. So what happens to them? These are all physical impacts. So your eyes, as I said earlier, you might not have be wearing glasses early, but now you tend to wear glasses when you're at an older age. You might develop cataracts in your eyes. You might have a poor eyesight because you're a diabetic, or because of general other conditions of aging. Your ears, you can't hear properly. They become less receptive for sounds that were normal earlier. You tend to hear louder stuff, but not quieter stuff. And your teeth also, obviously, there's deterioration in your bones. So your teeth are also a form of bone. Your gums tend to deteriorate, because of which the sockets become loosened. So your eyes and ears, with age, you might have difficulty focusing on objects that are close. You might have to wear glasses, and your hearing also may diminish. Again, as I said, your teeth, your gums might pull back from your teeth. There's certain medications to treat asthma, high blood pressure, high cholesterol that cause a dry mouth, which then results in the teeth and the gums to become slightly more vulnerable to decay and infection. Your skin and weight. What do you think might happen to your skin and weight? Anyone? So your skin may be wrinkled, you lose your elasticity, you may tend to bruise more easily. There's decreased production of natural oils, which may make your skin drier. There'll be wrinkles, there'll be age spots, there'll be brown spots, which are called aging spots. There's small growths called skin tags, which are more common with aging. Your skin is not as elastic as it was. Your weight could increase. So because you're sitting in one position, you're not very mobile, your activities are not that much as they were before. So you'll tend to gain weight. So whatever you're eating, that has a negative impact on you. So you need to stay active and eat healthy because you may have to burn those calories that you're taking in. So your metabolism, your body, whatever your food that you're taking in, that also might be decreased. So the energy that was produced because of your food, that energy might not be enough to drive those old bones and that old body anymore. So here we are discussing the effect or that physical changes have, we associating with them with aging on self-esteem and self-confidence. So obviously, when you're losing your physical strength, that has a physical impact in itself. You're losing your self-esteem, your confidence is going low. There can be illnesses like, for instance, there's a diabetic who has a weak bladder, let's say, that could have a negative impact on that person because of realizing that they're less independent like they were before. And again, when they're wetting themselves, for instance, that's something that obviously has an impact on them. There's the skin that you have, it tends to wrinkle. You have more wrinkles. You're not very physically uh, pleasant as you were before. So that knowingly or unknowingly does have an impact on you. You could lose confidence and begin to consider having cosmetic surgery just to boost your self-esteem. At some point, you find socializing very uncomfortable because you don't have those things that you used to have as a young person. So your hearing and vision, loss of vision, it's there's an increase of in loss of hearing, which happens with older age. It's called by a buildup, caused by a buildup of wax, increase of nerve sensitivity, or there could be repeated exposure to loud noises, and then that is why you tend to lose your hearing, and it becomes hard for you to understand what people are saying, and you have to ask them to repeat themselves, and you have to ask the volume of the television. So how do you tell? The older people, they want the volume higher, and you don't understand why this is happening. This is because they can't listen to it properly. uh, and then you could the older person might feel very upset that they don't have any recognition for their symptoms, and they're a burden on the others. They could just silent off, or they could just shut off from the others and lose their confidence. Your vision can deteriorate, could be very hard because you need different glasses for short sightedness, for far sightedness you need different glasses. And then this also leads to a loss of self-esteem and self-confidence. When you're not able to see or drive properly, it becomes hard for you to interact and be as mobile as you were before. So just a question, what is aging? Just a recap. So um, if there's an advance in years, it doesn't mean that it would be aging. So advancing years, so if you're of an older age group. So if you're older, if you're 65 years old, it's to do with the calendar. Aging happens within our bodies as the years progress. So they are associated, but they're not the same. We have no control over the calendar. We have to turn older a year later, but we do have some power, some control over the aging process and longevity. So there are basically five stages of aging, the aging process, right from the beginning to the end. So the first one is independence. This is when you're aging, you're more independent. You can handle your finances, your transportation, your loved life, your meal preparation, your medications, etc. Uh, the second is interdependence. So daily tasks are more difficult. You need more help for different stuff, your transportation, managing medications, etc. Dependency starts when the real problem happens. So the daily tasks that are not manageable, you need more assistance. At this stage, the individual will need some type of monitoring for their safety and well-being because they can't be left on their own. Crisis management, this is the stage almost constant monitoring is required, medical care, and end of life is the end. it's the one where you rest in peace, when you definitely rest in peace. Yeah. So there are three types of aging. There's biological, psychological, and social. So different types of aging have different impacts on your life. There are some lifestyle changes that you should make in order to avoid aging. So food and food supplements, regular exercise, foods to avoid, quit smoking, quit alcohol. Lifestyle is something that we choose in our lives. And we have no control over our genetics. So if we have diabetes in our family, if my father was a diabetic, if my mother was a diabetic, for instance, I would have more probability of being a diabetic, but I can change my circumstances where my diabetes would be controlled. And because of that, um, I would be able to lead a healthy life, regardless of my condition that's associated with my genetics. So you can have anti-aging lifestyle choices, which will determine how you live. And this is in your power, and you need to make sure that you know what are your choices and whether they are poor choices or good choices. Lifestyle choices include eating a healthy diet, exercising regularly, avoiding use of tobacco, other drugs, maintaining a healthy weight, establishing good sleep habits, moderate alcohol consumption, staying mentally sharp, again, keeping yourself active, keeping your mind active. Intentional socialization is very important. So I don't, I think I spoke about this, that the one factor that led to the greatest increase in depression in worldwide, depression that happened worldwide during COVID-19 was due to one major factor, which was the lack of socialization. So socialization is so important. No matter how hard you feel, it is to go out and socialize. Sometimes you might not even need it. You might want to just stay behind. But if it requires it, if it has an impact on it, it always has a positive impact on your life compared to a negative one. Yeah. So these are some of the references that you could utilize. That's it from my side. Any questions? I'm happy to take them. Any questions? So I think we should be comfortable ending this session. If you have any questions, any queries, please let me know. So this was the third learning objective that we've covered for our human growth and development. I will end here, and obviously the last session would be, we don't have the last session tomorrow, but then after that we would have a discussion on your assignment. So your assignment would be having to do with the concepts that we've learned so far in our sessions. So yeah, with this, I end my session. I wish you good luck, and I hope to see you tomorrow. Have a nice day, everyone. Thank you. Goodbye.